Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you're having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first story is titled Idiot Neighbor Eavesdrops and I Win. My neighbor is an idiot and we have been having issues with her from the start. 6-hour relentless dog barking 4 days a week for years, yelling at me for stealing water flowing downhill, dead rabbit on the doorstep, the usual property line arguments, emptying her toxic hot tub onto our property, lying by the hedges to spy on us, parties, noise, etc. ad nauseum. Just run-of-the-mill bad neighbor stuff. Eventually we built a giant fence and it had kept the ball cap to a minimum. Both yards have plenty of mature trees. We have 3 maples over 150 years old and a nearly 100-year-old birch, a 12-foot cedar hedge. Add that to the giant fence and daylight is at a minimum in our backyard in the summer. Idiot neighbor had 2 century-old trees and a very mature mulberry tree that hung over the fence in the only area that enjoys direct sunlight. Now, this part is entirely our fault. One spring we built a patio there with light gray stone. The mulberry tree has dark purple fruit and hers is extremely prolific. The week construction was finished was the week the berries ripened and began to drop in the slightest breeze. Sitting out there for any length of time and you would be pelted with berries leaving purple stains like you were shot with a paintball, and sweeping a path was the only way to not step on them. If this only lasted for a few weeks, it would be tolerable, but mulberries are in season all summer. The number of birds that feasted on the fruit and promptly deposited bright purple bird crap on everything we owned outside was unbelievable. Purple bird crap drip-dried everywhere on the patio and beyond. We started putting tarps over the entire patio to collect the bird dung-coated berries and emptying them into a bucket every time we wanted to use the patio. Remembering our neighbor's penchant for eavesdropping, I began to talk about mulberry wine. About how good my mulberry wine was, and how this year's bumper crop of mulberries was going to make so much wine, and how we were going to go on a vacation with all the money I was making from selling my mulberry moonshine. Visitors joined in the act, claiming they could not wait for their allotment of my fabulous mulberry wine and offering bribes to be moved up the list. I do not make mulberry wine, never have, and would not start with mulberry bird poop wine. One rainy early summer night, I heard and felt a tremendous crash. I ran into the backyard. The largest limb from the mulberry tree was lying in my backyard. A chainsaw was sputtering on the other side of my giant fence. The mulberry tree was coming down at night in a rainstorm. More evidence of her idiocy. There was a bit of yelling back and forth through the fence, me about her being a dangerous moron, and her to me about having a nice vacation without having mulberry wine to sell. She continued to cut down the whole tree instead of just the limbs hanging over our property. I laughed myself into the house, not quite believing my ruse worked so well and revenge was finally mine, but that poor tree died needlessly. Barely a month later, a vicious storm blew through our area, splitting one of her mature trees in half and damaging the other so badly it had to be removed. Now, the idiot has no trees, but all mine are still standing. The next story is titled, My Neighbor Constructed an Unlawful House on a Small Plot Adjacent to My Property, Causing Damage to My Driveway. Growing up in a small town, I had always been taught to be kind and respectful to my neighbors, and for the most part, I had always gotten along well with the people who lived near me. But when a new neighbor moved in next door, things took a turn for the worse. The property next to mine had always been a small vacant lot, too small to build a house on, but big enough for a garden or a small shed. I had always enjoyed the open space and the view of the trees beyond the lot. However, my new neighbor had other plans. He was a single guy in his 30s, and he seemed to be the kind of person who always wanted to stand out. When he first moved in, he came over to introduce himself, and I welcomed him to the neighborhood. However, I soon realized that he was not going to be an easy neighbor to deal with. One day, I looked out my window and saw that he had started to build a tree house on the small lot next to my property. At first, I thought it was kind of cute, and I didn't mind it too much. However, as he continued to work on it, I realized he was building it higher and higher until it was towering over my yard, blocking my view of the trees. I asked him if he had a permit to build the treehouse, and he just laughed and said that he didn't need one. He told me that he was building it for his niece, who he said loved to climb trees. However, I soon realized that he had built it more for himself than for his niece. He would often climb up there with a book or a beer, and he would sit there for hours, enjoying the view that he had stolen from me. I tried to reason with him, but he wasn't interested in listening. He told me that it was his property, and he could do whatever he wanted with it. I felt like I was hitting a brick wall. Days turned into weeks, and my neighbor's treehouse grew taller and taller until it was like a tower in the sky, blocking my view of the sunsets and the trees that I loved so much. I grew angrier with each passing day, but I didn't know what to do. I felt helpless and frustrated, and I couldn't even enjoy my own backyard anymore. One day, when I was coming home from work, I saw that he had installed a zip line from his treehouse to the edge of my property. I couldn't believe it. He was basically turning my yard into his personal playground. I was furious. I decided to take action. I contacted the town's zoning office and reported him for building an illegal structure without a permit. I also told them about the zip line and how it was invading my property. They sent an inspector over to investigate, and sure enough, the treehouse was illegal. My neighbor was given a fine, and he was ordered to take it down. However, he was not going to go down without a fight. He started arguing with the inspector and saying that it wasn't fair. He also told me that he was going to sue me for ruining his treehouse. I didn't know what to do. I was scared, but I knew that I had to stand my ground. I hired a lawyer and prepared for a legal battle. In the end, the case went to court and my neighbor lost. He was forced to take down the treehouse and pay a hefty fine. He was also ordered to stay away from my property and not to harass me anymore. I thought that the nightmare was over, but little did I know that there was more trouble to come. A few months after the legal battle, my neighbor started acting strange. He would often glare at me whenever I walked by his property, and I would hear him muttering under his breath. I tried my best to ignore him and go about my business, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was up to something. One day, I came home from work and saw that my yard was in disarray. My lawn had been torn up, and my flower beds had been trampled. It looked like someone had driven a heavy vehicle through my yard and destroyed everything in its path. I immediately suspected my neighbor, but I had no proof. I contacted the police, and they investigated the incident, but they couldn't find any evidence to link my neighbor to the destruction of my property. I was devastated. I had spent years cultivating my yard and creating a beautiful outdoor space, and now it was all destroyed. I didn't know what to do. But then, something miraculous happened. My community rallied around me, and people from all over town came to help me fix up my yard. They brought plants and flowers and helped me replant everything. It was a beautiful sight to see, and it made me realize how much I loved my town and the people in it. It's been a few years since the incident with my former neighbor, and I thought that everything was behind me. However, I recently received a letter in the mail that changed everything. The letter was from a law firm, and it stated that my former neighbor had filed a lawsuit against me for intentional infliction of emotional distress. According to the lawsuit, my neighbor claimed that my actions had caused him severe emotional distress, and he was seeking damages for the harm that I had caused him. I was shocked and confused. I had no idea what he was talking about. As far as I knew, I had done nothing to intentionally harm him. I contacted my lawyer and we started to investigate the matter. It turned out that my former neighbor had moved to another state, but he had kept tabs on me through social media. He had seen that I had moved to a new town and had started a new business, and he believed that I had done so with the intention of hurting him. It was ridiculous, but he had apparently become fixated on the idea that I was out to get him. He had spent years building up this delusion in his mind, and he was now seeking revenge for a perceived slight. The lawsuit was a complete surprise, and I was not sure how to proceed. However, with the help of my lawyer, we were able to build a strong defense against his claims. We provided evidence that showed that I had not intentionally harmed him and that he was the one who had caused the trouble in the first place. The case went to court, and it was a long and arduous process. My former neighbor was determined to get his revenge, and he fought tooth and nail to win the case. However, in the end, justice prevailed and the judge ruled in my favor. My former neighbor was ordered to pay for all the legal fees and damages that he had caused. It was a victory for me, but it was also a reminder of how fragile our sense of security can be. I never could have imagined that a simple dispute with a neighbor would turn into such a long and drawn-out legal battle. However, I also learned that when faced with adversity, it's important to stay strong and to fight for what's right. The experience made me more aware of my rights and more determined to protest them. As for my former neighbor, I hope that he finds peace and can move on from his obsession with me. I harbor no ill will towards him, and I hope that he can find a way to live a happy and fulfilling life. The last story is titled, My Mom Gave Me Up for $2,500. So, backstory, my mom and dad split up when I was roughly 9 or 10 years old due to my mother cheating on my father when he was out of the country. He's a pilot. At the time, it was me and my 2 older sisters, one of which was already an adult, so my older sister and I were left under my mother's custody due to my father always flying and not wanting us to go through moving all the time. As far as the details go, my dad not only paid my mom child support, but also paid off the house. Despite having little money to take care of himself, he paid my mom more than what he actually owed. Yet, My sister and I never saw that money. After the divorce, my mom turned to many things, sleeping around, gambling, drinking, and eventually meth. Though that didn't last long due to my dad finding out and threatening to take us away. My sister practically became my mother since ours decided to step down from the plate and I was too young to take care of myself. When my sister left for college, all the emotional abuse she took ended up falling on me, which sent me into a loop. Due to my sister taking all the damage, I typically saw my mother as, well, my mother. My young brain didn't notice how often she didn't come home at night, or the lack of food in the house, or the constant weeks I'd wear one outfit since I didn't have other clothes that fit. I didn't notice how not normal this is. Heading into high school, it became more and more obvious this wasn't right at all, yet I still loved my mother. We bantered and ate fast food together, and she was proud of my accomplishments. But she had her moments, dropping huge hints that I'm too boyish like my dad, refusing to let me cut my hair, pressuring me into wearing makeup, heels, dresses, convincing me I don't need therapy as my therapist at the time made me uncomfortable, one of those Christian therapists that made everything about God. While I am a Christian, it didn't help the conversation, and so on. Meanwhile, my dad met a woman and they fell in love. When she became pregnant with his kid, he moved her to America after my little sister was born and started a new family. I love my stepmom. She's literally the sweetest woman I know, and I adore my baby sister and eventually my second baby sister. Over time, after spending many nights in their home, I came to realize how much happier I was at their house over my mother's. One day, I told my dad I want to officially live with him. At this point in time, I've noticed how depressed I am and how things aren't normal in my mom's house. When I told my mother this, she was deeply upset and cried, but she understood, or so I thought. That's when everything went downhill. The text messages started, sly guilt trips and remarks on how someone else convinced me to move out, that my father convinced me she was the bad guy. The more these texts happened, the warier I became on talking to her. It got to the point where I would cry after every conversation because I was so confused and lost. One day she practically trapped me in her car in my best friend's driveway to tell me how my reasons for leaving her were bullcrap and that I clearly don't remember what it was like in that house. Cue my memory issues. But enough about that, let's get to the good part, the custody case. Due to me being the last child between my mother and father, my dad no longer had to pay child support. Obviously, they go to court about this. Except, my mom didn't show up for many, many hearings. When she did, she had this bullcrap story about how my dad owed her a crapload of money because he never paid the full child support, and how she felt pressured to believe him and trust him when he said he knew how much he owed her. He did. He calculated it himself and actually paid more than what was needed. So, if you're catching on, this fight was about money. Here's a fun little thing. My mom texted me maybe a month before this case started about how she desperately wants me to come home, how she'll do anything to get her baby back. That aged well, didn't it? Because one day my mom stated that if my dad pays her $2,500, she'll give up full custody of me. My dad agreed to it and it was over. She gave up her custody rights for $2,500. It still stings. I'm still bitter and angry to this day about it, and this case happened years ago. I don't think my mom is aware I know the details on this case, as she very rarely reaches out to me as if we still have a relationship to tell me how much she loves and misses me. The thing is, I learned that my mom actually despised me after the divorce because I reminded her of my dad. We have the same eyes and resting face, lol. My mom just loves being the victim and even tried to convince my sister she doesn't remember doing all the stuff she did to us. She even blamed my dad for her cheating on him and said so to my face. I haven't had a real conversation with her since Christmas, over the phone of course, and haven't seen her in person since maybe before the pandemic. She texted me recently all excited about a gift she got for my sister's unborn baby, and it sent a whole new wave of resentment towards her. I stopped trying long ago to have a relationship with her as she doesn't try in return, and will continue to do so until she admits her wrongs, apologizes, and actually tries to be a ducking mother for once in her life. Until then, my only mother is my lovely stepmom. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.